see how long that takes to. All right. I think we are live. YouTube says that we are live. That's always kind of hit or miss, and we'll see here in about 30 seconds, I guess, on my YouTube channel when it goes. But what is going on, everybody? Welcome to another stream. Today, I am here with Rhys-Jasper. This is somebody that was recommended to me on Twitter, and I'm super happy to have a chat, just briefly chatting on Instagram and things like that. So I will let you, if you would like to, you can do. Let me get the. I was trying to send you the link on that. Now the messages are showing on screen. There we go. But if you want to do like an introduction or anything like that, feel free, and then we will get started.
Yeah. So my name's Rhys-Jasper, and I guess what most people are probably interested about is languages. So I obviously speak English, and I also speak Spanish. And then I have a pretty good grasp on both French and Dutch. I've very recently started in on Irish and Cantonese. And then I also have an interest in sign languages. I was studying in Spain the past few months until got sent home from the pandemic. And so I was taking a course in Spanish Sign Language. But in June, I'm starting to take classes with American Sign Language to learn that as well.
Very, very nice, man. That is a nice repertoire of things going there. What's going on? I got some people filtering into the chat. Welcome, everybody. So you are, when you were studying abroad, is that, I'm going to get to, but just like obviously getting started, but were you, this is for university?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the fall, I was in Amsterdam, and then in the spring, I was in Granada.
Okay, cool. Gotcha. So let's back up to the beginning here. And I know that you're from the West Coast. What is I always assume that a lot of people from the West Coast probably know more Spanish than people from the East Coast, just because, especially like in California and Southern California and stuff. But at what point did you start? At what point were you interested in languages? Did you grow up bilingual, or is it something that you got into?
Well, my dad grew up bilingual, but I never grew up bilingual. I had a little bit of Spanish because my dad's family, and then my mom was a French teacher, so I had a little bit of French in there, but never like a good grasp on either language. We did travel a lot when I was a small kid, so that had some influence, but I didn't really get into languages until probably about 4 or 5 years ago, because I started learning Spanish about 6 years ago, but I didn't actually make progress until about a year or two in because of how slow classes are in high school. And then once I started self-studying and seeing progress in Spanish, that's when I was like, oh, hey, this is really cool. I'm going to like reach out into other things that are interesting.
Yeah. So Spanish was the first one that you looked into.
Yeah.
Was there, you started learning before you started like studying abroad, right?
Right, yeah. So I already had a high C1 level when I went to Spain.
Whoa.
So all
Okay.
my classes were taught in Spanish.
Gotcha. And you took Spanish in high school. That's what you're talking about, the classes
Yeah,
being slow.
yeah.
What, once you got out of high school and you were talking, because you're talking about slow, what was kind of the method in terms of, like what did you do like after that? Like what was kind of your self-study routine?
Well, I study around my third year of high school, and so I just started listening to music that was in Spanish. I started watching some series on Netflix, and that was kind of what interested me. I got the first Harry Potter book in Spanish,
Nice.
and reading that, I was like, oh wow, I'm learning all of these new words. And then here in the US, we have the AP exams, which give you college credit. And so I took the AP Spanish exam in my senior year. And so it's like that kind of like the last 2 years of high school was when I saw huge improvement. And then that was what kind of got me to think of like reaching out further.
Yeah. Did your I know I've seen people talk about kind of the idea of if you become more advanced than what your class is, it almost makes teachers mad. Was your teacher receptive to that, or how did they feel about it?
Well, my third year Spanish class was kind of lower, but that teacher was the AP teacher, and so if she really liked you and you earned a high A in the class, she would let you skip the level 4 and go straight into AP, which at my school was considered to be level 5.
Mm.
And so she really liked me because she saw so much improvement in me, like that I was had such a high level. So she added me into her AP class, which is where they would often put a lot of the native speakers who never had practice like with writing and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I was in that class, I worked with a lot of native speakers on assignments. And so that felt like such better fit because of she helped me to like get into that class.
Gotcha. Okay, that sounds super super cool. So and then you like you said you just started listening to music, so kind of an immersion based
Yeah.
thing. Did you do any kind of book study? Was there any specific books that you would look at? Did you do like the 501 verb books or anything like that?
Well, I never used any Spanish textbooks except what I was using in school.
Mm.
And so I was like that's when I sort of started getting into more of like the different language learning theories and like the immersion versus like the standard textbook, because I saw like the textbook wasn't really getting me anywhere, and I was like, well, this is where my weakness is. That's what I should try and improve. And so that I think kind of created some bad habits for me, because now with other languages I'm like, oh, I don't want to use a textbook. That's like so terrible. I'm not gonna learn.
Right. I mean, I get where you're coming from. Like, see, because I was always the app guy. Like, I was like, I'm gonna use
Oh,
nothing but apps, you know. And then I've used apps for so long and saw no I'm talking years and never saw any progress.
Yeah.
That's why, you know, recently I finally. But it becomes an addiction, you know. Like you're addicted to that
Yeah.
streak. You're addicted to whatever. So it was kind of hard to let go. But now that I haven't used them, I'm like, oh my god, there's so much stuff out here. Like,
Yeah, like I always try and look for the free resources. So for Irish, because it's such like a minority language, that like I started with like Duolingo, and I was like, I'm not really understanding what I'm doing. Like it's great for learning vocabulary, but not for understanding what you're doing.
right.
So I have spent so much time looking for free resources, and I might have spent a really similar amount of time searching for resources as I've spent using them.
Right.
But it's like with Irish, it's because it's like a dying language, all the Irish people are like, help save our language, and they create free stuff. So it's when you find something good, it's like it's fantastic. Other stuff, it's like it's hard to find, but once you find it, it's like really helpful.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I actually did recently download an app, which is, I know, super controversial, I guess, for me, based on my thing of no using apps. But like with Japanese, for example, I really want to get into grammar, and I'm doing the whole immersion approach thing. Like I'm doing that.
Yeah.
But I also want a little bit of supplementation, and I know that I can read Take Him and stuff like that. But I find it to be incredibly bad. And then I saw Lindy post a video about Boompo, and I just thought, you know, that looks fun. I say it looks fun. It's not a game. It's not gamification, but it gives you small little bursts of grammar, and then there will
Right.
be multiple choice. It'll have like, you know, watashi blank nihonjin desu, right? Like so if you're saying I am Japanese, what particle do you use? And it'll have like wa,
Oh,
de,
gotcha.
ni, no, mo, and you pick the particle, and which obviously you could use different particles, but for different things. But for the sense of what you're working with, and I thought, man, that actually is something that I need, because it's not gamification. It's a little bit more in depth than what Take Him is in terms of like practicing. And I also find so far it's summed up and written a little bit like it's more so easy to understand.
Right. So they put it in more of like a comprehensible format than just kind of like dead textbook.
Exactly. Yep. And so I started using that recently, but other than that, I'm just like, I watch TV, I do read a lot on Link and stuff like that, but that's pretty much where I go. So your dad, so you said your mom was a French teacher. Is your mom bilingual, or did she just learn French?
She learned French in college and studied abroad and stuff.
Okay.
But then she kind of like lost interest in the teaching like children kind of aspect.
I gotcha.
So that's why she stopped teaching. But
Okay.
it's like it was the culture and the language that really got her into wanting to study it in the first place.
Okay, gotcha. Do you think that part of maybe an interest in learning languages was seeing your mom teach, or I know you said your dad grew up bilingual. Do you think that maybe hearing them speak something different maybe triggered something in you where you're like, that sounds, I think I'd like to do that. Like, do you think that had
Well,
any
yeah.
influence?
Yeah, my mom taught middle school when I was really little, so she would try and make lessons fun for them. So it like she would look for shows on TV, or she would find these like little, very comprehensible, low level, like small children's books. And so um, I would watch those shows with her on TV, or she would read me those books at night. So even when I was like really small, like there's a video of me, I think I was like 1 or 2, and she would ask me in French. She was like, "Oh, what sound does this animal make?" And then I would make the animal sound. And so it was like from a very small age, I was like, I wanted to learn that language. It was
Yeah,
just something happened when I was probably like 7 or 8, where I was just like, nah, English only. But it
right.
was also partially my parents had brought me up mainly only English,
English.
and that's all I used at school and stuff. So it was just kind of like that just made sense.
Right.
And then it wasn't until later that it was like, oh, it can also be like a hobby, it can be useful, it can lead to more future opportunities, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, man, you dropped something on an application about speaking a language, and that's, I mean,
Yeah,
that's definitely a bonus point. So let me see. There's a thoughts on super memo. I have no clue what super memo. Do you know what super memo is?
no idea.
I have no clue. Amit, sorry. I will. It's something I'll check out, but I have no idea what super memo is. Um, and of course, anybody listening, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them by. What came after Spanish? Like, at what point during Spanish were you like, all right, it's more than just bilingual. I want to learn a bunch of stuff.
So there, like my high school was really weird, and they started phasing out their French classes. And so by the time I was a freshman, that's when they had their final senior class taking their final class, and there would be no more classes beyond just that single class.
No, I mean, yeah.
Chinese speakers were actually taking the class,
Mhm.
and then they also offered Latin. And so for me, it was like Spanish was the only choice. But I was kind of like, if French had been offered, I would have wanted to take that also, not instead. So then I sort of kind of wanted to renew that French knowledge. And then around my second or third year of high school, I was just kind of browsing YouTube and kind of got lost. And I found the Voice Kids of the Netherlands. And I was like, oh, what is this language they're speaking? And I like did some looking on their channel and figured out that it was Dutch. I was like, I guess I'm gonna learn this language. And that was probably like the inciting factor.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Petra says hello, hello, welcome, welcome. Nihonyo says, do you think Duolingo is good for beginners?
I do think it's good for beginners. I think the way they market it is probably not so good, but I think it's fantastic for learning vocabulary and like having little pieces. Like that's how I started learning Dutch because I didn't know where to start. So I was like, oh yeah, people talk about Duolingo all the time. And so that's also where I started for Irish. But it's fantastic to have the vocabulary and have them in separate sets that are thematic and you can learn the vocabulary that way. The problem is that they give you sentences that don't really make sense and they don't tell you what to do with them.
Right.
So you can take those sentences and say, this is a noun, this is a verb, and like that kind of stuff, and say, oh, here are these other vocabulary words I've learned. That's also a noun. So what if I swap these and then you can make a different sentence? So like that's really how it should be marketed, is that they're giving you these puzzle pieces. They're just really not telling you how to make the best, most efficient use of it.
Yeah. I saw a meme the other day. Also, language learning lover says, hola, hola, welcome, welcome. Or bienvenido says it maybe.
Yeah.
But I saw a meme the other day that was it was like something like native conversation from a Duolingo user, and somebody was like, "Oh, hello," and somebody was like, "My horse loves beer." Like, and
Yeah, exactly that.
I was like, "Man, that's hilarious." I don't think I'm trying to think when I was using Duolingo for Spanish years ago. I mean, obviously, I understand why you would teach beber for to drink. Like, I fully understand that.
Yeah,
But like, I've also known, like, it seems like in a lot of cultures, tomar is more
yeah,
used.
they've added that now. Like, I I was trying to create connections between Spanish and French, so I went on Duolingo to use their learn French from a Spanish speaker
Hmm.
just to make the connections, not
Yeah.
to actually learn anything, but because that way I could practice going between the two modes.
Right.
And so it was really interesting to see how much they had changed like the layout and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think going to the is it good for beginners? I think it depends on the language. If it is a high priority language, Spanish,
Right,
French,
yeah.
German, the Italian course seems like it's lacking a little bit, but I would still probably say Italian. I'd say you're going to be good. If it's like Navajo doesn't even have audio, Hawaiian doesn't have audio. Um, so I mean that. Now, if you get a specialized language, like I'm sure the Klingon course is probably good because that's made by Klingon lovers. I can
Right.
speak firsthand because the only tree I've finished was the Esperanto tree, and that was made by Esperanto speakers. So that one is done very, very well because it's like something they're passionate about.
Right.
But so I think pending the language, I don't know. I know Irish is on there, like Irish Gaelic or whatever, but I don't know how it
Yeah.
is, like because it's not like a high priority language, so I don't know.
Yeah, it used to be kind of bad according to people in the forums, but when I started using it, they had gotten a native speaker to record the audios.
Mhm. Oh, nice.
However, that made it that you couldn't use the slow motion one, like
The
so
turtle.
you could never really slow it down. Yeah. And also part of the problem is that like it's only a starting place.
Right.
So there are some great explanations of certain grammar aspects, but it doesn't really explain like other parts. It's like, oh yeah, you'll want to change this thing for feminine nouns, and then it's like, well, how do I identify that?
Mm,
And so they just like tell you stuff without telling you everything.
yeah.
So I guess for beginners, if you want to use Duolingo, it's a great place to start because it's free and you can kind of get into that language before spending money on like a book or a course if you don't know that you're going to want to continue with the language.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to put it. And honestly, like I know that I'm against apps right now, but like not necessarily against them. It's just I had to make my own routine. But like
Right, yeah.
I think if you use it as a supplement, I think that that's the that's the way to go. Like if kind of like the reason I made that video of why I stopped using Memrise, and it's because I don't use Memrise the way that I'm supposed to use Memrise. I
Right.
use Memrise and then I go back into it and I re-review stuff, which defeats the point of the SRS.
Hmm.
But I think if you use it, do Duolingo, do 5 lessons in a day, right? Spend 20 minutes on it, and then go and try to find those words in the wild. Watch a TV show in your language or something like that. Man, that would be huge.
Yeah, like the Irish media, they have like all their content that's in Irish. A lot of it is actually subtitled in Irish. So I went through this video, which was a mistake to do this, but it was like 4.5 minutes long. I was like, oh, that's not terrible. I can just write down all the subtitles. Took like two whole pages of a
Right.
notebook. And but after writing all of that, I started seeing like repetition in certain words.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I was able to read through it, I was like, oh, like I actually know that word. I just didn't understand it when it was being spoken to me. But when I look back, I'm like, oh, I can actually piece together these sentences. And then when I started kind of like a couple days later, I was looking at some other vocabulary and stuff. I was like, wait, I learned that word when I was just doing this other thing, and so it gave me like a place in my mind to say this is where this word is,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh yeah, now I know what that means, and then it just builds the meaning off of it.
Yeah, yeah. No, and seeing things in repetition like that, especially when you're writing them down, that's why. Like I will write down, like for example, I was doing an Afrikaans thing the other day, and
Yeah.
I came across so like in Spanish, if you do something right, if you're going or if you learn to speak a language, right, you would say like ayudo a hablar, like you would conjugate it to you, and then the next
Yeah,
verb would be in
and
the
right,
infinitive.
yeah.
Well, in Afrikaans, the way that so like if you're saying you are learning to speak English, for example, it would be ek les. Is it les or leer? Point is,
The
like,
second one
yeah,
is learning because it's
yeah,
really similar to
leer.
Dutch.
Yeah, leer. So yeah, but it's not ek leer praat. It's ek leer Engels praat. The praat comes
Yeah.
at the end, and so like, but I saw that a couple times, and I know that you're probably thinking like, well, you should have picked that, but like, just seeing that pattern a couple times, I was like, okay, so it's not verb verb, it's verb action or verb what
Right.
you're
Like
doing
you gotta
verb.
split them like that. Like it's like yeah, you can see the pattern and like you know it's a pattern, but it takes you a while to understand that like oh, this is how I should structure my sentence. The repetition
Yeah.
helps you to get that.
Yep. No, absolutely. And and writing it down and stuff help. Let's see. Language Learning Lover says, "Were you guys around when Duolingo had duels?" I missed that. It really helped me because I'm so competitive, and it forced me. I've used Duolingo since 2014. I don't remember duels though, but I do remember
Yeah.
they used to have a tab called Immersion where you would go and translate articles from the web, and it would give you points
Oh
based on that.
yeah.
That
I
ruled.
remember that. I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, they've removed a lot of features, and that's frustrating.
Yeah, and they've kind of like I think it was actually very helpful. Like obviously the kind of organization and the vocabulary was not so good back then, but it was like the features were great and it's sort of as they've improved the actual content of the lessons, it's like the whole structure and like stuff has gone down and it's become more of like a game to attract users
Yeah.
instead of like it promotes competition over learning. So in those leaderboards, you'll see people who just spend hours a day like going through the easy lessons so that they can get like thousands of points and top their leaderboard.
Yeah.
Like I did it just to get the achievement of being the top of that final leaderboard. I think it's like diamond or something. I have not been on Duolingo since,
Yeah.
but I was like trying to do like filling in holes of my French vocabulary. So I just went from the beginning and I just like pounded it and then like I was going up like down the tree, I guess. And then that's what because I was spending like hours a day because I had so much free time that got me to the top of the leaderboard. And I was like, no, this is so bad. Like I don't think I've actually retained what I've done. I was like,
Right.
no more.
Yeah, I think like I think if you were competing against people that you knew and it was done in a like a healthy manner, it would be fine.
Yeah.
Honestly, even if they capped how many points you could get in a day. But I
Oh
have like
yeah.
there will be boards that just start and people have 500 experience in a
Yeah,
day.
I heard someone be like, "Oh, the trick if you want to get to the top of a leaderboard, like wait until like the day's almost up, or like if you wait until later in the week when other people have already been added to their leaderboards." But it's like, yeah, but then it's like it becomes strategy of how to win the competition instead of I'm doing this app because I'm trying to learn a language.
Right, right. Yeah, I can agree with that. I do immersion with Duolingo right now because Anki wasn't working for me since you have to really be dedicated to it. You definitely I don't
Yeah.
have you used Anki?
I've tried, but like I haven't actually gotten into it. Like I have it on my computer and I started making flashcards, but I never really like
Got into
got
it?
to the point where I used them.
No, I understand. I
I
understand.
just struggle with vocabulary in like any language. Like I probably have the same vocabulary or a very similar vocabulary to where I started high school till now. It's just I've learned more like scientific words and like, that's about it.
I got
Like my vocabulary was like really great and then it just kind of stopped and I struggled to like learn new words. Like I have to really pull apart the word and be like, okay, this means this and this kind of sounds like that. So when I put it together, it makes this image and therefore that's how I'm going to remember this word. And instead of just like knowing the word.
right. No,
So that's like in English. So that's why I can't do like the rote memorization of other languages.
right.
But like
Not
it's dependent on the person too.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree with that. I was against Anki until I had some help setting it up, and once I kind of understood that, it made more sense. But like I think it's very uh, I don't want to say it's not user friendly. It's very like if you're new coming into Anki, there's too much going on, I think.
Oh, yeah.
So,
That's what I've heard.
what do you guys think about streaks?
I think that's also a bit problematic.
Yeah.
Like, the idea is that you're going to practice a little bit every day, but then it is also kind of like some days you just need a break to kind of process what you've been learning. Some days you'll go at it for hours, and the next day you just kind of need a break. And so it's like, it's supposed to be like, oh, a reminder to come back.
Mm-hmm.
But unless you're really dedicated to learning that language, like the motivation kind of needs to come from you to see progress. Otherwise, it's the same kind of thing as the leaderboards where it's like you just do it because your brain is telling you you just got to do this instead of getting in a mindset like today I'm going to learn.
Yeah, I think that the better leaderboard, or not leaderboard, I think the better streak would be how many days you studied this month. You studied 29 out of 30 days.
Right,
Fantastic. Because the problem is, just in terms of the way our mentality works, a lot of people, because I was the same way, you see this streak, and so even if you don't want to do it, you're going to do it, even if it's just one lesson to maintain that streak. The problem is that creates a negative relation with the app.
Right.
So
also with the
then-
language.
And with the language. Then you miss one day. Well, once you miss that one day, that streak is over. So
You're
who cares?
done.
I'm done. So I think the better thing would be like I really do think the better thing would be like where you could break it down to see how many days that you engaged in the app per week, per month, and like maybe on a yearly
or like
basis.
they make the streak per week, so it's how many weeks have you learned the language. If you work on the language 4 days out of the 7, then you get 1 week of your flame, and then
Yeah.
that way it like builds up. So you don't have to do something every single day,
Yep.
but you're making progress.
Yeah, because it's you the worst thing you can do is create a negative relationship with the language and whatever source you're using because that
Yeah.
is just not like now if I start getting bored with YouTube videos, instead of forcing myself to keep watching them in Japanese or whatever, I'll start watching some Netflix shows. Well, when those start to irritate me or get boring, I'll pop over to YouTube because usually I'm good by then.
Yeah.
So you just have to keep, going up.
Gotta
So
switch it up. Yeah.
yeah, I think Lingo Deer is better than Duolingo as far as providing explanations for grammatical structures. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot. I downloaded Lingo Deer, but this was also kind of around the time that I was like, I'm not gonna touch Duolingo anymore, so I haven't really gotten into anything to really see how it works.
Yeah,
But from like the 2 days that I used it, it was just so much like better laid out, and like I felt like they were there to help you learn the language, and
Yeah.
there was like enough repetition that I was like, okay, I'm starting to understand what I'm doing.
right. No, I completely. It's set up, and part of what I like is, which if I had it on my phone, I would show you, but I don't. But I love that as if the sentence is breaking down, you can click on whatever word that you're struggling with, especially like in Japanese with particles and stuff. So you see like, oh, watashi no kaban desu. What is the, I don't know, and you click on no, and it's like possessive particle. Okay, and it'll even have an example, and it's
Right.
that is huge.
Yeah, so like the problem with Duolingo is that they'll just kind of like give you a drop down list of like stuff, and you're like, well, which one am I supposed to use? Which is more correct?
Yeah,
And they don't explain anything. It's just like, oh, here are a few translations we just came up with.
yeah. You know what? I don't know if they still do this or not, and which I cannot check. If anybody watching has Duolingo, let me know. You used to be able to click on the word, and it would give you the conjugation for that word in the tense that you were looking at. So, like, if you were looking at a present tense, like if you saw like
Yeah.
bebo agua, whatever, something simple, it would be like bebo, bebe, like it would bebes, bebe, like it would have the entire list of conjugations
Oh,
there.
yeah, it doesn't have that anymore.
Man,
At
that was
least
so
not with the
useful.
languages that I've used.
Yeah.
It will just give you the single conjugation. Like if it gives you a sentence in like English, say,
Yeah.
and you're supposed to conjugate that verb and you don't know how, if you click on it, it just tells you what you're supposed to put for that sentence. Though sometimes the piece like the way they piece it apart, it ends up being wrong. But they only give you like that one.
Right. Fair enough. That's yeah, man. I missed that. Which Mondly does that. I use Mondly for this is not Big Perm says not on mobile. Mondly does that. Like if you click on the word, because I use Mondly for Afrikaans, and like it'll do that. Like you can like for example, leer for to learn, which is also to teach. And like you can click on it. Of course, in Afrikaans, it's a bad example because it's all conjugated the same way. There is no conjugation per pronoun, but it's still like if you were learning Spanish or any language with verb conjugations, you click on it and you can see that conjugation for all the pronouns, which I think is really cool. Let's see. I have I missed one. You're right. When you study for the streak, you don't pay attention to the language. Yeah, I think it becomes more about that streak. And the thing, and you know what's actually a good point? I heard somebody say this the other day, and they said we shouldn't look at how many days we've studied the language. We should look at how long.
Right. Yeah. Like when like the European framework of reference, like the A1, A2, that kind of stuff, they have recommended hours.
Yeah.
How many hours of study you should have in order to meet that level. Yep. So that is so much better because you're like, oh, well, I go to class 3 times a week, so therefore I'm spending 3 days a week learning. Well, it's like, well, how much time are you in class?
Yeah.
How much time are you paying attention in class?
Right. Like I watch, I know Eric, the guy that's the marketing manager of Link, and he'll upload on Link's channel his Japanese study, and he will say how long he studied in terms of months. He'll be like, "Oh, I've been studying for about a year and a half," and he's like, "But I've been studying for I'm about 1,500 hours in," and I'm like, "Okay, obviously the year and a half is easier to break down, but 1,500 hours gives you an exact time frame that it's taken him to get there."
Plus, people take breaks, so like. You could say, I've been learning this language for 6 months, but really you learned it for 1 month, took 4 months break, and then started up again for a month.
Yeah. Yep. No, absolutely. And that's me with Japanese. I've literally been learning Japanese for 10 years. It's just been off and on.
Right.
So, yeah. I have a 640-day Duolingo streak, and it's 100% a chore, but I want to get that 666 days at least. Hey, man, whatever your motivation is. If that's motivating you to continue going, I mean, whatever. That's on you. I'm currently using Memrise to help me learn a new vocabulary. How do I know what words I should learn when making my own flashcards? It should Memrise, if you put them in a course, it should automatically. If you're asking, like, if you should put them here, okay. So I'll also, and I would like to hear how you feel about this as well. I actually thought the other day, in making flashcards, that I was like, you know what? I'm purposefully not going to group things together. Like, I'm not going to group
thematically.
Food. Yeah, I'm not going to group food items together. I'm not going to group entertainment terms together and stuff like that. And the reason is, I don't want to eventually memorize a list.
Right.
I want to know that word, and so I'm actually going to just, as I come to words, I'm not going to put them in different folders. I'm literally just going to put them in as I come to them. Because it'll be harder to memorize a list of random words than being like, oh yeah, let's see, how did that go? Fish, apple, bread, pear, cherry.
Oh right, yeah.
So I don't want to get to that. I don't know if you have any experience with that, or if what you think about that.
Well, I just pulled it up here, but like a really long time ago, I found some post on Instagram that I bookmarked. It's 625 words to know in your target language. Mm-hmm. And so it's really broken them down in like animal, transportation, clothing, job, society, like that kind of thing.
Like general terms.
Like, yeah. So it like even though it's broken up like that, you can make sets like that. But what you could also do is if you find a bunch of sentences, like have some phrases, and you can pull apart those phrases and say, oh, I like blank. And then just take words of things that you like from whatever sort of category, throw them in there, and then say, oh, these are things that I like. And so then whenever you talk to someone, you're like, oh, I like, and when you're like introducing yourself, and you'll have like set words that you can just kind of like pull in a different piece and like
Yeah,
yeah.
that's actually kind of have your own pre-made sentences, kind of ready to go, and that way you're good. That makes and honestly, that probably is a smarter idea, is to learn vocabulary. Even if it's just saying "I like," boom, it's still just a couple of additional words to
Right.
get additional exposure to and stuff. Let me see here. I want to thank you for helping me with my lack of motivation. Now I'm doing MIA with Japanese. Yeah, no problem. Hopefully you can stick with whatever. I know I'm not the person to be saying that, but hopefully you can stick to whatever. Hours are hard to measure, though. Hours are hard to measure.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a general estimation, but I think deep down, if you say that you've studied 100 hours or 200 hours, I think you'll know if you've studied that long. I
Yeah.
mean, but it's definitely hard. I get what you're saying, though.
Yeah, like if you keep some sort of dedicated journal, you can say you sit down and you study for a while, and you can say, "Oh, I think I started about 2 hours ago," and then just have like a dedicated page to how many hours that you spent, and just like add a two, or like have a running total, and just every single time you study, like add something else to it, or
Mm,
like if you have like an Excel sheet or a calendar or something that will just automatically calculate.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That's
but
actually
yeah, really, it's hard to estimate that.
Yeah, I have an Excel sheet because on YouTube you can actually look at your watch time if you're on mobile,
Mm,
and so I have a
yeah,
specific channel dedicated to Japanese. So anything I watch, I can immediately know how much I've watched. But again, that doesn't count reading and all that stuff. So
right.
do both. A list helps anchor the words into your memory, but also throw in your Anki and randomness. And ultimately, realistically, the biggest thing to take away from any of it is make sure you're doing what works for you. Like
Right, of course.
that's mess around with it. Like if Anki, and that's again part of the reason with Memrise. Memrise wasn't working for me, and that's because I was not using it the way you're supposed to use it. Like I overthink. I have this weird like OCD where I'll look at a word 3,000 times, but it's like there are studies, and who knows what to believe and whatnot, but they have done tests on overstudying versus using like an SRS, and looking at that word over and over and over and over does not necessarily mean you're going to memorize it. And I just, if I would let the natural SRS system of Memrise take place, I'm sure I would be fine. But unfortunately, my brain is like, nah, go study more.
Yeah, what works for me is having context for the words that I learn,
Mhm.
because like in any language, even English, I just really struggle to learn words unless I can relate it to something.
Mhm.
So maybe it's like you learn a phrase because you're watching some murder mystery show, and then you're like, "Oh yes, he left no fingerprints at the scene of the crime," and then you just randomly know that phrase. And
Yeah.
so then when it comes up in a conversation and you're talking about something, you're like, "Oh, I can say this." Like it might not ever be useful, but now you know the words fingerprints, crime scene, and like you know what verb to use to say that someone left fingerprints.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, there's a sentence that I learned from watching Erased in Japanese, and it was something to the effect of like, "Kore wa chi desu ka?" Like, which was a shoot. Like, the neighbor was like, "Is that blood?" Like, but hopefully, I'll never need that sentence.
Right.
But I mean, it's there. So,
You know how to ask what things are, and you know the word for blood.
yep, there you go. Yeah, plug in, boom, or I guess it would actually. I'm sorry, it would have been sore because kore would be this. Sore would be that. Is that? But like, yeah. So sore wa blank desu ka is that whatever you're talking about. It's
Right.
that plug and play. Anki, blah blah. Thoughts on outputting early when you start learning a new language and the possibility of error fossilization.
Well, so if you start outputting really early, obviously you're going to make errors and they'll become habits until you jump up by level and you realize, oh, I should be doing this instead. And like if you keep like writings and journals or something, you can look back and say, oh, wow, that was so bad.
Hmm.
I know now that I'm supposed to write it like this. But I think it's kind of dangerous if you don't output until you feel 100% confident in a language, because you're never going to feel 100% confident in a language.
Right.
So you have to be willing to make those mistakes and have people correct you. Because if you're talking with a native speaker, a lot of the time they will correct you. And so that way the error doesn't fossilize, but it's kind of like gives you confidence while you're starting up. And like that way you can practice your pronunciation. So when you read stuff in your head, you're pronouncing it properly instead of getting terrible pronunciation that when you finally start speaking, you've already solidified that.
Yeah. No, I'm like it's a weird thing for me. Like I know that you've got the Benny Lewis speak from day one, and then you've got, a lot of people who have the don't speak for a long time, and I don't really know where I fall along. Like I don't know in my Japanese when I'll start speaking. We'll see. I know with Afrikaans, like I already output, but so you know what I mean. Like I don't know why with one I am and one I'm not. I don't know if it's because I'm more serious with one than the other. I don't really know, but like I don't know. I'm in like a weird spot with that because which Afrikaans obviously is easier for me because it's so close to English in terms of vocabulary and stuff. Like I mean, like right there is like regdar, like right, like you know you can hear it in almost a weird accent, but like I don't know. I'm in a weird spot with it.
I think it kind of also depends on like the language and what resources you're using, that kind of thing. So like for me, Cantonese, I'm not actually like speaking to anybody. I'm when I like I'm using like some resource, the person says the sentence and then you repeat it. That's technically still outputting. You're not having a conversation with feedback, but you're still outputting. On the other hand, with Irish, I found this really interesting kind of conversation group thing. So it's like a call once a week. They tell you the topic a few days in advance, so everyone prepares something, and then you get broken up into small groups, and you kind of say your piece. People ask questions, follow up, that kind of thing. I've only got like a month or two of actual learning knowledge, and I went to my first conversation this past week. I was by far like the lowest one there, but it was so helpful that by the time I left that conversation, I was like, wow, just saying these few sentences that I wrote down, like it took me like an hour to learn vocabulary and make these sentences that I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's grammatically correct. And it was just like a small paragraph, but by the end of that call, I was like, oh, I have such a better understanding of how to talk about my hobbies now.
Yeah.
Or it's like something like that. It's like the output and the feedback. It depends on what language you're using, what resources you're using, who that output is with, or if it's even with anyone.
Yeah. I get what you're saying for sure. Let me see. That's fluent forever in his approach at learning languages. All right, I'll try to find words that I think are useful in everyday speech. Not all countries produce as much content as like Russia or Japan, so immersing with something like Lithuanian native content is a lot harder due to the lack of.
Oh yeah,
I can agree with that. The best thing I tested this with the idea of Afrikaans. I put my YouTube channel in Afrikaan or like South Africa to see if Afrikaans content popped up, and it did. So I don't know what the YouTube situation is like in Lithuania, but I feel like if South Africa, because there's like I think 8 million Afrikaans speakers, and if I can find some content for them, but I do know what you mean. It's still not as like I feel like such a like an entitled person because like with learning Japanese, there's nothing that
so
you
much.
can't find in Japanese. There's so much like of anything. Like there's literally if it's a genre of anything, Japan has it and it's produced and it's insanely easy to find.
Yeah, if it's a harder language to find, try going to the national news media or like just their national like media, like their TV shows and stuff like that, or the national radio. Well, like it will probably be more higher level than what you're ready for if you're a beginner. But if you can find anything that's subtitled, going back, like watch for 5 to 10 minutes, go back, watch it again.
Yep.
And when you feel confident, move on to the next part. Like the Irish media, they have an app that I downloaded it. It's their like media player. So they've got like all these different shows and stuff that are in Irish. They've got a lot of them subtitled. So there's like kids shows, regular adult TV, that kind of stuff. So it's like really helpful to see this native speaker content,
Yeah.
even though it's like that's really the only place you're gonna find it. It's no Irish content on Netflix or anything.
Right. Yeah, I could see that. Have you tried using a VPN and looking to see if there's anything?
I haven't, but like I said, I'm such a beginner level
Yeah.
that I should probably start learning instead of finding more resources.
Right. Right. That's true too. That's true. When you were reading, do you look up every word you don't know, or do you just kind of gloss over them?
I got into the bad habit with English of just glossing over them, and so that's why my vocabulary is kind of bad. But what I try to do is if it's a book that I own in a different language, I'll circle words if I like, really cannot figure them out from context, but I will keep reading. And when I get to like the end of the chapter, or if it's a long chapter after like 5 to 10 pages or something, whatever's like comfortable, I'll go back, look up the definition, and then that generally helps me with understanding. I'll reread the section, move on. That way I'm like still kind of getting the figuring it out from context part, but that way I can go back and learn new words.
Yeah, that's actually a good point too, because, well, there's two things there. One, that word may pop up again, and the context that you see it in again may help you. But two, I also find that if you stop every time you don't know a word, man, it destroys the flow of your reading, which is detrimental to what you're doing. Yeah, that can be very, very hard. Thoughts on you can answer this and I can answer this. Have you ever used Assimil?
I've heard of it, and I kind of looked into it, but I never actually got it.
I've used it for about a single day for Mandarin Chinese, and I think that it can be, because it's just conversation practice. It seems okay. I just don't have enough experience with it to really, like, I wouldn't be like, I highly recommend this, right? And that's just because I haven't really used it enough.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think Luca uses it and talks quite highly of it.
Yeah, I do know that he said he tried to use it with Japanese, and that was part of the reason he failed at learning Japanese.
So maybe don't get that.
So maybe not for Japanese, but well, and you know what? To just break that down further, I think that a system like Assimil, I think it can be good for, like, I can see the value in it, like, even without using it. But I do think that I think something like that would be more beneficial if you're learning a language that is, like, if you were to learn, if you're an English speaker and you're trying to learn Spanish, French, Italian, Romanian, or maybe even, honestly, even something like Dutch or something like that, I think it could be way more beneficial. Maybe some Scandinavian languages.
There's similarities.
Yeah.
But if it's so vastly different, you might need something in between to sort of get yourself there.
Yeah, for sure. I already output despite not being that confident in Spanish just yet. I find that because I'm afraid of making mistakes, I almost need to make them in order to feel comfortable in speaking. Mistakes are important because it creates a connection in your brain with what you're talking about, and odds are you won't make that mistake again, and then you also learn something from it.
Right, and like if you're afraid of making mistakes, I love talking to myself when I'm like completely alone. Like if I'm in my room, I'll talk to myself in a language just to like practice saying stuff, or like in the shower, just have a conversation. And if you're a low level, it helps save water because when you run out of things to talk about, you should be done showering.
Yeah.
But like, it's like just having like 5 minutes to like really get your thoughts out. Or like if you choose a topic and say, okay, today I'm going to talk about this, and then just like try and say everything you can think of, you're going to make mistakes. And when you come to something, you're like, I don't really know how to say this. Your brain's going to remember that you didn't really know how to say that. And so the next time you have to say something like that, you'll probably say it right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's all about that mental connection, man. Like, for sure. Do you have any plans to start outputting Japanese Seabolt, like, after X amount of months? Probably not I'm going to study for at least 6 months before I start outputting. Like, I'll probably kind of casually practice around the house, maybe occasionally. Like I might think to myself and say, this. Like as a matter of fact, I do that in Afrikaans. Like I've actually replaced, if I'm saying like oh my god or something like that, which it's not oh my god. I think it's actually oh my goodness. But like I'll say oh my genad, like or genad. Like I'll say that. So I guess but in terms of Japanese, it'll probably be a little while, and it's just because I know a lot, and by saying that, I still know so little. It's insane. One interesting thing is the fact that if you create a language yourself, it's not that easy to get fluent in. I've created a conlang, and my friend speaks it a lot better than me. That is interesting. Tabanai. I can read some of that. When reading, I write down a lot of the most common words I come across that I can learn them later. I'm about 5 to 10 words a chapter works for me. Yeah, that sounds super, super good. A common point of conversation among is language is all input, thoughts. I don't know if necessarily people think it's all input. I think that there are like these sects of linguistics who think that is how you acquire the language more so rapidly.
Yeah, like you also have to kind of rely on interaction. So like say you get a lot of input and then you know how to read and you kind of like your input is from reading and listening to music and stuff, but you've never actually had a conversation with someone. They're going to say like, "Oh, like what's your name?" and you're going to be like, "I'm all right."
Yeah.
And it's like you're just not going to be familiar enough with the sounds. So it's like you have to also think about interaction and being able to understand someone and have them understand you.
Yeah. And I think like especially if you're talking about from a stance of like where I'm doing MIA, like the idea is the immersion and all the input gets it into your head. Being able to produce it is a whole nother section of doing that. And which I've not actually read a lot of Matt's stuff on outputting, and that's just because there's no point in me reading that because I'm not anywhere near that point of my life yet with Japanese. So, but it takes probably just as much work. I don't know, this is pure speculation, but there's just as much ability and time that it's going to take you to be able to output that. My thing is, the reason I'm so heavily on input right now is because if I'm trying to speak with somebody, the more input that I have, even if it takes me a minute to recall it, at least it's there. If I start speaking now with 500, 1,000, 1,500 words, how many ever I have, it's still going to be so limited, and then I'm trying to recall stuff that I don't have. So that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I just want all that input so I can kind of...
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's there. So, hold on. I know that you had sent some stuff, too. I want to... Let me see. So, we'll start with the first one here. Code switching.
Yeah, so I just filmed a video on that. I just have to, like, edit it by, like, cutting off the ends of me turning on and off the camera. And then that'll probably be up later today or tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But I think code switching is really interesting when you look at, like, polyglots and just multilingual people in general. Mm-hmm. Versus, like, code mixing, which you'll see more in, like, bilingual children when they can't really differentiate between the languages yet.
Right.
Because like code switching has to obey the syntactical rules of both or all languages. Mm-hmm. So you can't say the casa white because in Spanish it goes noun and then adjective, but in English you go adjective, noun. So it's breaking the rules there.
Right.
Because of the way you've broken it up. But like say you say like your whole sentence like, "Oh, ella tiene novio," you know? Like that's proper code switching because it still obeys the rules of both languages.
Right. That makes sense. I had no clue what that was called. I had thought about trying to do that for Japanese at one point, and then that exact point that you made is why I didn't do it, because I thought, well, if I throw a Japanese word in there, it's not even going to be close to grammatically where it's supposed to be in the sentence.
Right. Like with kids, the reason that they have to swap between languages before they can differentiate between them is because they don't have enough competency or enough vocabulary to be able to say like a singular thought in both languages, they've got to piece it together in order to be able to say that thought.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm actually anxious to see that video now because it's something that I've thought about. And I guess you could, if the sentence was just right, you probably could do that with like Spanish. But yeah, even with Spanish,
Yeah.
you're still going to, it's still going to be a little odd, like you say, especially if you're describing something like, huh, that's interesting. Do you? I mean, have you? Is that something that you've done a lot? Like,
Yeah, so I'm breaking this up into at least two parts, and the first part is more just informative. The second part is going to be talking more about like my personal experience. So like I used to do this thing where it was like English mode, non-English mode.
mhm.
And so whenever I would try and like speak a language that was not English, if I didn't know a word, I would just be like, okay, I'll fill it in with Spanish because then at least I'm not speaking English. And so that was kind of like a problem where at the very beginning I had not gone language, language, language. It was English, no English. And so now if I just let my thoughts run wild and just kind of say whatever comes to my head, I will just kind of like swap and like pull a piece from this language, something from that language, and it's like code mixing entirely. There's like no proper codes. Just
Yeah,
like I'm just kind of
just out
doing
there.
whatever.
Something that I actually thought about recently, and it's I watched on the Polyglot conference. They released Lindy's talk from this
Yeah, I
past
haven't
year.
watched that yet, but I have it
She,
saved.
yeah, it was really good. Which I mean, she's an incredible speaker in general. But she talked about people ask her, I guess, what she thinks in, and she said it was a hard question to answer because it depends on the context of it. In this video,
Right,
she talks
yeah.
about it. She talked about how, if she's doing a specific thing, this is going to be paraphrased and probably not even correctly, but just as an example, like if she's doing something with art, she'll immediately think of it in Japanese, like with her UI design and stuff like that.
Hmm.
She said if she like stubs her toe or something, like she's very emotional in Korean, so she'll pop and say something in Korean, like, and I
Right,
thought it was a
yeah.
very interesting concept because which there's a lot of thought on it. Like I know Matt versus Japan talks about how you don't actually think in a language, you think in mentalese, you're thinking in pictures, you're not actually thinking in
Hmm.
words, which makes a lot of sense to me. But then also hearing Lindy's point of view in terms of how things just come to her depending on the situation, I also thought was a very interesting concept. I highly recommend watching that video just
Yeah.
because of that stuff. But does that have you like just thinking on it? Is that something that's happened to you? Like, is there ever a certain instance where just another language pops out quicker and more natural to you than English or any other language?
Well, particularly with Spanish, because my dad understands Spanish and my mom has like a good enough understanding of lower level Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
where I was just kind of allowed to say things in Spanish and have people know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So there's certain like connector words or like adjectives that I like better in other languages than English.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my brain, I just always use that instead of the English word. And so then when I express my thoughts to my family, if I say that, they still understand what I'm saying. And so when I'm with other people who don't speak those languages, I'm like, okay, I have to make sure I say this in English. But sometimes I'm just talking and then like something slips out and they're just kind of like, what? And I'm like, oh, wait. So it's like
Right.
for me, it's not like the certain context. It's like my brain is very like logical. So how I was talking earlier about like the puzzle pieces of sentences,
Mm-hmm.
my brain's kind of like that. So it's like, oh, I like to say this in Spanish so much better than I like to say it in English. So I'll just always say it in Spanish.
Yeah.
So it's like more like replacing for me than just the context.
Yeah, I get like which obviously this isn't the case. Like I don't say it in Afrikaans, but I love the way that you say you're welcome in Afrikaans because it's literally dit is a plaisir, which is like this is a pleasure. Like
Yeah.
and like I think that sounds so much cooler and like so much more personal than you are welcome. Because I've always thought the you're welcome thing implies like it almost to me comes off as like you are welcome, like you are grateful for what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, it's just weird to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in English that are just kind of odd. Like when people sneeze, you say bless you, but in like every other language, you're like health.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm also a big fan of in Spanish, de nada.
Yeah,
No
like, oh, it's
problem.
nothing. Like, I don't care. Like,
Yeah,
whatever.
I like that. Um, yeah, I'm anxious to see your video on that, and I have all the links to both channels in the description below, so you guys can go check that out because it's something that I definitely that's interesting to me, and especially after talking to you, and then again, it's funny how things just hit at the same time because you had sent that message, I had talked about it before, and I didn't know what it was called. And then
Right.
Lindy released the video talking about kind of this idea. Like it's weird how sometimes
Yeah,
just
like,
things.
it's like all these polyglots like release videos on the same things at the same time. You're just like, how is everyone
Yeah,
thinking
just everybody's
separately the same thing?
on the same wavelength. That's interesting. I'm gonna go back to chat for just a second because I know there's a couple more
All right,
things, and
yeah.
there's not a bunch. There's just a couple here, but could you briefly describe your daily language routine?
So for me, I got into a very great habit at the start of the year, and I continued it when I went to Spain. But then when I came back, I have lost it, and I've tried to get back into it and lost it multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
But first thing when I put on headphones and I listen to music in whichever language. I have different playlists. I just listen to whatever I haven't listened to most recently
Mm-hmm.
uh, for 20, 30 minutes while I just like kind of like get ready in the morning or like before I'm ready to get out of bed sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that way it's just like first thing, input. And then a lot like I have a journal. I don't have it on me. I should have uh, gotten it handy, but I have um, these different colors depending on the language, and then I have symbols to determine whether it was active or passive learning.
Mm-hmm.
I try and get like 2 to 3 things at the bare minimum. So maybe I just listen to music 3 different times because that way I'm still getting input in all these different languages.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I have a lot of time, I'll try and do some focused reading or like learning some new phrases or vocabulary. I was doing so much better when I was like actually with my classes and like before I had my classes, I was still on winter break at the start of this year, so I was spending a lot of time every day learning. And then since I've gotten back, I just like I haven't even left my house except to go to the grocery store sometimes. So it's
Right.
like it's so easy to just do nothing. But I'm thinking for the second half of the year, I'm really gonna make like a structure. So
Yeah.
right now I'm working on figuring out like how much free time I have and how much time I want to dedicate to each language.
Yeah.
So right now I've started sort of kind of just like only doing passive learning each day because I'm spending more time figuring out what an effective structure is for me. So right now I'm
Right.
kind of in like a weird limbo, but at the beginning of the year in my language goals video, I said I'm not going to make a schedule because I know I won't stick to it and like it's just not going to work for me. But now I'm seeing that this is also not working for me, so I might as well like
Right.
try and do something.
Yeah. I got you. I mean, sometimes you go through those kind of uh, phases where you just kind of got to figure stuff out, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And that's part of my issue with a lot of the stuff on YouTube within the polyglot community and language channels is that everybody wants to just cast out what they think and like that's the
Yeah,
gospel, and it's like sometimes they don't think that you need a chance to kind of settle in and figure out what you're doing.
yeah. Like my like everyone has like their this is what works and like that's it. I
Hmm.
guess my what works is find what works for you because
Yeah.
I've tried everyone's like methods and stuff and like I have my own learning difficulties, so it's like I need to make sure that my language learning
Mm.
like targets my weak points the
Yeah.
most effectively for me. So sometimes I need a schedule and sometimes I need to just sit down and watch Netflix.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree. Agree completely. Um, Also, I'm Dutch, and there is a ton of Dutch content, like years worth of TV, but it's probably hard to find. Yeah, I don't.
Oh yeah, you can find like bootlegs of old TV shows on YouTube.
It's interesting. So Singaporeans must be masters at code switching. They must be.
Oh
They.
my God. Okay, so I've been reading Crazy Rich Asians.
Mhm.
Like I've seen the movie a bunch of times, but I'm actually like reading the book now. And so they have stuff in like all these different dialects and it's like the author has just added it in so like cohesively that it just flows, because that's like how people actually speak. And so at the bottom he's added footnotes for like what it means and in what different language it's in.
Yeah.
But like it's really cool to see that.
That is cool. That actually makes me. I really want to write a. You said in the way that people speak, because one of the big arguments in languages is, in terms of reading, is written language is different than spoken language. I want to write a book that is written the way that you speak. Like, I'm talking like I want to use wanna, gotta, like, you know what I mean? Like the way that you speak. Like, I guess it fully can't be done because there are a lot of times when, like, for example, T's will become a duh sound. Like, that would kind of be hard to really fine-tune, but, like, I still think it would be cool to try to get a book out. Because I bet if you tried to read it, even as a native speaker, I bet it would be a little hard at first. Like, you, like...
To get the style writing. Like, with Cantonese, they speak Cantonese, right? It's completely normal. But then anything that's written is written in standard Chinese.
Right.
So what I've heard, I haven't actually watched anything yet, but I've heard that when they subtitle things, the subtitles do not match word for word what the person is saying. They just tell you in the written Chinese what the person is saying in regular Cantonese.
If you get a chance, man, go check out Luke Truman. Because he speaks Mandarin and Cantonese. His channel has a lot of cool stuff with, like, just about, and he has like full videos on like content that he immerses with and stuff like that. He's just a good dude to check out.
All right.
Luke Truman.
Yeah, I've written it down.
Full-time fluency is the thing. Have you ever started learning a language and quit within the first hour because of its difficulty or low quality of resources?
I have not. I have mostly just searched for more resources. Or I say, you know what, I'm not ready for this right now. I'll come back to it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I would crown myself as the king of dabbling, but I don't think there's been anything that I've really. There are methods that I've used, like this is actually my third attempt at using MIA. Like, I tried it in, I think, June of last year or July of last year, and then again in like October or November. So there are, and like not even a day, like I couldn't make it through, and it's still because I was still trying to figure it out. But I don't know if there's a language that I've studied for, like, that I've started and then been like, you know what? I take that back. I did, but I wouldn't count this. I did with High Valerian. Like, I was like, I'm going to look into this. And then I was like, you know what? I don't watch Game of Thrones. Don't kill me, for the love of God, people. But I don't watch Game of Thrones because I was interested in conlings, ultimately.
Right,
what it was.
yeah.
But after I saw the grammatical structures of it, I was just like, you know what?
Nope.
I don't care. If I was really into Game of Thrones, maybe, but like, I don't care enough about this to put myself through this. So maybe you could say that. In Dutch we say graag gedaan. I'm trying to get those G's out, which is something like I was happy to do it. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I always thought that English, you're welcome, sounded patronizing. For example, in Slavic we say nemas zatso. That's probably butchered, sorry, but nemas zatso, which means you don't have to thank me for anything. Yeah, like in English, and I know that, I mean, just as English speakers, like, it's become you say you're welcome so much, you really don't break down. Like, if I talk to any of my English-speaking friends who are not interested in languages at all, and I was like, have you ever thought about you're welcome? And, like, I'm sure they would just be like, what are you talking about? And then if I tried to explain, like, do you not, like, you are welcome. You're fortunate I told you what I was thinking.
Right,
yeah. It probably wouldn't hit them quite the same. We say it so much, just like we say love in English. It's become, you say it so much that it really doesn't actually mean anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing with you're welcome. Like, we say it so much, it's just me as a language learner seeing the way that some of these people say you're welcome, like in other languages. It's just, I'm like, yeah, patronizing is a good word. That's a word I was trying to look for earlier, like when I was trying to really explain what I was talking about. But it is, man. It's just like, it's like, you're welcome. You You're welcome.
Like, you're just so lucky that I did this for you.
Yeah.
Whereas other languages are like, oh, like, don't mention it. Like,
Yeah.
it's all good.
Yeah. Which is the most American thing ever. So really it fits.
Yeah.
That's the most, or English thing and whatever. So, what is the worst ever language learning app or resource you have seen? Man. There's probably something. Do you use apps regularly, or are you more so of like a physical
I'm
content
the
kind of
person
person?
who downloads apps and never opens them.
Gotcha. Let me see. I don't know, man, because like any app that I've used, I've generally found
Like,
some sort of use.
Yeah, each app has its own kind of like, oh, this is good for this, but it sucks at everything else.
Yeah, like I was trying to think I mean, because you know, I mean, again, it's so easy to crap on Duolingo, but there is a lot of really beneficial stuff, and especially for those core languages, right?
Yeah,
So
like I think it's Spanish, French, German, and there might be another one, but they introduced like some stories thing.
Yeah, and they have them set up now with the CEFR
Yeah.
scale. So
those are helpful, but like
and then,
only to a point.
Yeah, and then Lingo Deer obviously does a good job. I think Busu does pretty. Oh, you know what? Nihonyo just said for me the worst app was Kawaii Japanese. You know what? I'm gonna side with this because I downloaded that app because so like there's a game on PC called Koei, and which Koei in Japanese I believe means like voice or something like that. But the game is actually set up. You're someone who gets kind of stranded in Japan, and so you learn the language. You're playing as this character, and they teach you because you're like, well, I'm stuck in Japan. I better learn Japanese, right? So you go throughout your day and you learn Japanese in context of stuff that's happening to you in your life. And I think it's supposed to teach you like 1,500 or 2,000 words or something like that. The reason I bring that game up is because I wanted I was like, surely there's some. I was like, that's a cool idea. There's got to be something like that on the phone, right? And I looked it up and I found this game, the same game that this guy's talking about, Kawaii Japanese or girl, whoever you're speaking, guy or girl. And like, I'm so general with my speak. Guy, I say guys for everybody, but guy or girl, whatever, because your profile picture is a sweet anime chick. And the game is so bad because you can't really do anything, and like you can't even really add flashcards, but like that's what it's designed on, and you have to pay for everything, which I'm not necessarily against, but like you can't even like play the game to unlock crap, and like the only thing that I even got was the hiragana for aeueo, which whatever, and like I didn't even get any word cards. It was terrible. Like it was such a bad game. So yes, I'm gonna sign with Nihonyo on that. Kawaii Japanese is terrible. Let me see. Let's get through another. Learning in school versus self-study, and then also learning minority languages and stuff like that. So in school versus self-study, which we kind of touched on earlier. Is there anything else you want to jump into on that?
Well,
because we did kind of cover a lot.
Yeah, I think there are some countries where learning in school is actually quite helpful, but the American education system has a lot of problems that people don't tend to kind of address, I guess. But they start you at such a low level when you're in like grade school that they progress so slowly. They don't really introduce stuff. Like American education in general is like we teach to the test. So you learn what you need to pass the test.
Yep.
And you take the tests and you get good grades so you can go on to the next grade.
Yep.
And so it's not actually, we're going to teach you so you can learn, and then we'll just assess if you have learned.
Right.
It's you need to learn right now, not you need to learn.
Yep.
So the thing with the languages is that you're not actually starting to understand the language. You're just memorizing vocabulary words, forgetting them the next day.
Yeah.
And so
memorizing conjugation tables and
So like, oh, I remember in my Spanish classes, it was like every single tense was listed on this side, and then you got a few verbs across the top, and you had to just like fill in the entire chart. It's like how it like I get how that's helpful,
Yeah.
but it's really not. Like
Yeah.
self-study, you can target what you need to work on, and you
Yeah.
see progress.
Well, my big thing for the conjugation tables, and I can't remember. It may have been when I was talking to Aaron from Think Tam Languages, or I can't remember who I was talking to, but conjugation table. I mean, I get why they're important, but there's some words that you don't need to know in certain conjugations.
Right.
How many times in your now I have said this word, but it's because me and my wife have a child, and sometimes I will say, we said, hey, like, if he's like, oh, I don't want this. And I'm like, hey, we said it's time to go to. But, like, have you in your life really ever said, we said? Or, we said. Like,
Right.
there's just certain context that you just don't need. And you'll understand that if you watch television or anything.
Yeah.
So, like, there's just certain conjugations that are so pointless to write down. We said. We said.
Right. Or like, if you understand the conjugation patterns well enough, you don't have to memorize the conjugations for every single verb. You'll just, when you finally need to use it that one time, you'll be like, oh, this is how you conjugate I said and they said and he said, and okay, this must be how I say we said.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird it's a weird thing. And I do want to get to the low resources as well of the language, but there's another thing that comes. This is actually a good point, especially if you're learning Chinese, because it's symbol related. But what do you think about non-language learners who use languages such as Japanese to show off? I've had a coworker post a picture from the office with the caption "Gyunyu, she's monolingual."
Oh, I think that's hilarious when people do that.
I think so too. Like, honestly, I'm fine because, like, I think especially Japanese, like, it's such an exotic language to English and Chinese as well. Like, I mean, we get tattoos and whatever of Eastern Asian symbols. I've not really seen a lot of Thai or anything like that, or even
Right.
Korean for that matter. It's those symbols, but I mean, if it makes her feel happy about herself, I mean, let her do it. Does she know that it means milk? That's my question.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did she post a picture of milk or something?
Yeah. So I am curious about that. So in terms of learning languages, like learning minority languages without a lot of resources, like what would you say, and just insert maybe like tips on getting stuff, because there are a lot of languages. I mean, Afrikaans. I'm learning Afrikaans, and there's not hardly anything for
Right.
that, but especially like things like Icelandic, which is really blowing up
Oh,
lately,
yeah.
but there's not a lot for. And then I think about some of the African languages, your Yoruba, your Zulu, your Twi, your stuff like that. Like, how would you approach that? Just because you can't just log on to Duolingo and be like, all right, time for my Zulu lesson.
Yeah. So I guess part of it is you have to look for resources, but you have to know what will be helpful to you. So sometimes you can find like print books, but obviously you can't read the book and say, oh yeah, this is going to be helpful for me, I'm going to buy it. You just have to blindly buy it, and then
Yeah.
hopefully it helps. But if you really dig around, you can find like maybe short courses that people have made that you can find a PDF for, or you can look for like children's activities. Like sometimes there's like, if you find like coloring pages or like short stories or something, you can find those things available. Just you have to really be okay with spending a lot of time looking for stuff.
Yeah.
And when you have bigger languages like Spanish or French or German, where like there's just so many resources available, you really can take advantage of having this resource for this purpose, this resource for this purpose, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But with your minority languages, you have to be okay with at the beginning saying, okay, I'm going to use this one website, or I'm going to use this one book, because it's really good at what it does, and that will give me a base.
Yeah.
And then you move into the native content as soon as it becomes partially comprehensible to a point that it's like helpful.
Yeah. I think I actually made a video on this topic about how, in terms of like with Afrikaans, which every time I would say Afrikaans, people chastise me in the comments for how I pronounce it. I don't care right now, right? I had somebody chastise me for the way I said hiragana and katakana. And I actually had an interview with somebody talking, because I did an interview with Lindy, and
yeah, I think you said it in that interview.
Yeah, and people are like, oh, the way he said, and I'm like, the point was, if I'm speaking to someone who is speaking English, I'm gonna say it the way that an English person says it.
Like, also, I just respond in whatever language someone says something to me. So if I'm speaking in Spanish with someone, and then the last thing that someone says is in English, I'll just respond then in English.
Right.
And I'm not gonna stop and properly pronounce the word, because then people are gonna be like, oh, why are you doing that? You think you're better?
Right. That's exactly, yeah. Like if I'm talking to my buddy, like my buddy Justin that comes up all the time, and he's not really into languages. Like he's supportive, but he's, I'm not going to talk to him about the theory behind different things or whatever, But like I'm not going to be like, oh man, today I was looking up hiragana, katakana. Like, I'm not going to like he'd be like, I okay. And it's not because I'm culturally insensitive. It's hiragana, katakana. We're speaking English. I'm speaking fast. Let's go. But in Afrikaans, not to get derailed on that.
Right, yeah.
I actually found, specifically for this, and I can't speak, and I do down the road, especially Yoruba and Zulu, I really want to look into. I really want to get into the languages of Africa, because I find just the more that I'm kind of, because I feel, I actually mentioned this, I was talking to a guy earlier who he was learning Hausa, which is probably not how it's pronounced at all, Hosha or something like that, which is an African language. And I said, I feel like such a sellout and such a douche, because I want to learn African languages, and I'm learning the whitest African language.
Yeah.
Because I'm learning Afrikaans. But anyway, and maybe I'll see if it works with like Yoruba and Zulu or whatever, but like, I actually kind of found that with a lack of resources, it helped me focus and actually get further, because I wasn't spreading myself thin over 100 resources. Yeah.
It makes it easier to say, this is the location that I'm going to study this language, because it has audio, it has the writing out, it's got everything, because it's like the one good resource you can find. Commit to it until you can move on to the native content.
Yeah, because with Spanish, and that's part of the reason I had to get rid of apps, and with Japanese, I'm literally learning with Anki and native content, or just jumping in,
Yeah.
And I use Bumpo for grammar study. So that's the three things I use. But yeah, with Spanish, I would do Duolingo for a little bit. I would jump in and try the free trial of Fluencia. Maybe I'd try Rosetta Stone a little bit. Memrise has a little bit of stuff, so we're going to check that out. There's, just dozens and dozens of apps, for Spanish and any of the high-spoken languages, so much that I wouldn't immerse in any native content at all, because I'd be so busy doing these apps.
Especially as you get to higher levels, with those major languages, they have graded content, learner content at higher levels, whereas those minority languages, they've only got you up to like low intermediate, and then it's all on you.
Yeah.
But like, say, Spanish, French, German, you're seeing graded content B2, C1, even C2 content.
Yeah.
Made for learners. So you're not even seeing that like native way of speaking and writing that you would by engaging in native content.
Absolutely. When I was that's do you want to say anything else about the limited resource? Well, I hope I didn't minimize that page. But sometimes I'm really bad for jumping around. My brain just goes. But yeah,
oh no, that's fine. If there's more questions or anything.
When I was learning German in school, I knew 4 tenses for 100 verbs by heart, but didn't know how to differentiate between genders because our teacher didn't find it important. I've actually heard Germans say that, like native Germans say that they will sometimes still mix gender just because there's so much. Like you just kind of get used to saying them, I guess. But here's like in Spanish, and I know that this is wrong. Like there are some words that I know are masculine or feminine, even if they have the O or A ending. But like, man, if it's got an O, it's masculine, and I'll say it. And then if they correct me, cool. Like, just because I don't want to hang myself up on a sentence for 20 minutes trying to figure out if it's masculine or feminine.
Right.
Which German, I know German and then Russian and probably some other Slavic languages where they'll have three. They'll have the masculine, feminine, and neuter. So I'm sure that's an absolute headache. But
and I think like Czech has like 8 different possible cases for nouns or something.
That's such a Slovakia Slavic. I said Slovakia.
Yeah.
That's such a Slavic thing, man. They're just like we want to make this difficult. The milk thing. I mean, she works in an agricultural company that produces milk, but the photo was just a selfie at work. She put the milk there on purpose because, as she said, Japanese just looks cool. Yeah, if I took a photo of myself and just typed out like Neko, like cat, like that would be super weird. Now, if I was showing a picture of my cat and I typed Neko, that more context. But that's a little hilarious. There are very little resources for Arabic dialects. That's true.
Yeah, that is so true. Like,
everything tries to teach you modern standard, which is not useful in terms of speaking.
Right. Like, I went to Morocco for 2 weeks as part of my time when I was in the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. And, like, Moroccan Arabic should not really be considered a dialect of Arabic because of its influence from Spanish and French and the Amazigh, like the indigenous languages and stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's like you have to find something that's specifically for Moroccan Arabic, and if you try and use it anywhere else, they'll be like, what are you talking about? So you'd have to use modern standard Arabic.
Interesting.
But like I think the universities around my area, from what I can gather, I think a lot of them teach like Egyptian Arabic as like their dialect, or like, or
that's the most common
Saudi Arabian Arabic. I think I've seen somewhere else too.
Gotcha. Which is like Gulf Arabic, I think.
Yeah, because those countries all over there, they kind of just understand each other because of how close and similar they are.
Yeah, I actually there's a website called oh my god, I'm not gonna remember it. There's a website for Arabic. I'm sure if you type it's like I actually found it through an ad, so you could probably find it. And I'm sure on Facebook tomorrow I'll see an ad for it because I spoke it into existence.
Yeah.
But like, there's a website that has a bunch of different Arabic dialects, and it's video, but it's not like video courses teaching you. It's like content in that Arabic dialect.
Oh, that's very cool.
There's like Egyptian, and there's Gulf, and there's just some of the different terms or whatever, but like of dialects. But so I have there's a smoke shop by me where the guys are from Yemen. Now I don't smoke or anything, but I was going on vacation. Not that I don't have anything against smoking, but like I don't smoke. But the reason I was in here is because my boss was like, "Hey, when you go out, are you going towards the smoke shop?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'll be over that way." He said, "Do you mind to pick me up a refill on whatever vape or whatever the kids are doing these." He's older than me, but whatever you guys are doing these days. And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll go in there." And so I went in there, and they spoke Arabic, and I was like, "Hey guys, it's funny. I have a lot easier time talking to somebody about languages if I don't dabble in their languages. I would never ask a Spanish person because it makes me nervous. But so I was like, "Hey, where are you guys from?" Which I could see the kind of look on his face, because I bet he was like, "Oh God, here we go." And he was like, "We're from Yemen." And I was like, "Oh, that's really cool, man." I said, I've dabbled in a bunch of languages, but I've never tried to study Arabic." And they were like, "Oh, cool. You could they kind of lightened up, like."
Yeah.
But that's just kind of the area that I live in. But so I was like, "Oh, cool." So I was like, "Cool. I'm gonna try to learn a little bit of Yemen Arabic, right? Yemenese, whatever, the Yemen dialect."
Right.
Which is a thing. Yemen dialect is a thing, and there are no resources for it anywhere. The website that was touting all these Arabic dialects, they were like, every Arabic dialect, and I was like, there's no Arabic. So I went in and I was like, so Yemen, I said, I found like there's Egyptian, and then there's like Gulf Arabic, and there's all, and he was like, no, it's just Yemenese, man. He said, and it's not Egyptian because the guys next door, they're from Egypt, and sometimes depending on how heated they're talking, we can't understand them. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds terrible. So
wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. But anyway, what was that leading? Man, I talk sometimes and just don't know
I
where I'm
think
going
it
with that.
was from a question. Oh,
Arabic resources,
yeah,
yes. So the big problem with Arabic is it's not that there's not necessarily resources as much as each resource is going to be probably for a different dialect. Like that's the issue.
yeah.
And
And
if
the
it
most
doesn't
common
tell
ones will
you
teach modern
modern
standard.
standard, yep. What do you think about the balance of learning languages and learning about learning languages? I'm gonna let you answer. Here's my input on this. If you love learning languages, learn about it in your language. Like when I want to learn, like I love language learning. It's like something I not just like learning languages. I love the idea of learning languages. I love learning about theory and stuff. So I'll go to my YouTube account in Japanese and I'll type in just like language learning in Japanese. Or I'll type in a specific language. I'll type in like ego benkyou shimasu or something like that, like learning English, learning or whatever. So that's learn about it in your target language because then it's killing two birds with one stone.
Right. So I think the problem is that a lot of people just make videos in English because that's like the new lingua franca, which
Yeah,
basically means French, but whatever.
right.
But it's like everyone just is gonna speak English, so that's where all the main resources are, and all the like major people make videos in English. So like that's where I consume most of my media because it's like thoughtless for me. Like I don't have to put in any effort.
Yeah,
Even though if I watched any videos in Spanish, it also probably wouldn't be effort, but my brain is like, oh no, that's not English, that's effort.
yeah, right.
So I just watch a bunch of stuff in English. But the reason I watch that is mostly just like to understand what other people are doing. And like sometimes people give tips or like they'll say something where it's like after watching like an hour of their videos, I get like one thing out of it. But it's mostly just like to play in the background while I'm doing something else. And
Yeah,
that way I like, get some sort of tips. But a lot of it, people say the same things. So at some point, you should probably just stop
right.
the learning about language learning and try and apply that to yourself because you'll probably find your own
Yeah.
opinions about it.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the stuff that I learn from language learning. Like for example, like these podcasts, right? Like technically, they're wasting a whole bunch of your time.
Right.
So it's hard. It's hard for me, but I will play something like this at work or something like that when I'm just casually listening. Now, obviously, I do find there to be benefit in passive listening. We kind of touched on that earlier, but or you were talking about passively. Did I
Yeah.
learn a passive or not? But I will dedicate a little bit of time to learn. Like if I have a favorite YouTuber or something, like if Days of French and Swedish releases a video and it's not something
Right,
overly
yeah.
visual, I'll put it on and listen to it while I'm at work. That way, I can still relate or not relate, but I can still interact with this content because it's a YouTuber that
Yeah.
I love.
Yeah. I love how he's like very straightforward. Like he's very honest about language
Yeah.
learning.
Yep.
Instead of just like, yes, you can learn in 5 minutes a day. And people are like, oh, I can't do that, so I'm not going to try. He's
Right.
like, it's a lie. Like,
Yep.
you can't do that.
Absolutely. And so, but if it's time at work, like at night, I will not sit down and watch an English video because that's time when I can spend full on paying attention, immersing in Japanese or whatever it may be. So that's kind of where I think beneficially to learn a language. Learning a language versus learning about learning languages. Learn about learning languages in the content you're looking in, right? Because language learning, if you started to study a language, you probably know the word to study. You probably know the word English, whatever language
Right,
you're learning,
yeah.
you probably know that. So you're going to be picking up these words, hear them in context, which are going to make them stick in your brain. See if you have subtitles. I don't know, and just go from there. Like that's just
Yeah. Also, it doesn't have to be grammatically correct. Like people write keywords in the video when they put them up. So if you just say learn English and whatever language this has been written in, something's going to come up because when people put up that video in their language, they're also going to put in the keywords learn and English,
Yep.
and it's going to come up.
Absolutely, I agree completely. Sometimes sometimes I spend more time learning about learning languages than actually. Yeah, no, and that's what we had just talked about. If you're looking for Arabic dialect resources, check out Lang Media and Gloss Languages. They are imported onto Link as well. Interesting. That's very, very cool. Do you use Link at all? Steve Kaufman thing?
I've like it's one of those other resources where I've got it because I've heard such good things about it, but I've just never really used it.
I understand. It's got there's a love hate relationship with it. It seems like people. I don't know a lot of people who are just like eh. Like there's a lot of people who are just like this is the worst thing ever. It looks terrible, and then there's people who are like I don't know, dude. This is like my favorite thing. So, Berber. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, that's the Amazigh languages, like Berber. It's kind of same word.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Slavic has 7 cases and neutral gender 2. I imagine it's absolute nightmare for learners, and I'm glad I'm a native speaker. Yeah, that sounds terrible. What's your opinion? Oh, okay. This will be. I've addressed this topic a million times, but I'll ask you. What's your opinion on? And it doesn't even have to be Nathaniel Drew. Ikenna made a video like that. Shalma made a video like that. It's become a
Yeah.
hot button, but about learning a language in a week. And the videos where polyglots say they speak French and just count to 10, like kind of the talking head, but it's clearly a scripted video. So what are your? I'm not. I rant too much when I talk about this. So I'm gonna let you just kind of
Okay.
go with it.
Well, I think Lamont from Days of French and Swedish made a really good video talking about that. Because like they weren't starting from zero. If you say I learned Italian in a week, like I think he in particular had experience back when he was in school.
Yeah.
So he wasn't starting from zero. And that like what Lamont said was that it should have been titled like how much you improved.
Yeah.
Like because you're not starting from zero if you're making those kinds of videos. Or like someone else made like a video that was like, oh, like learning this language in a month. It's like that was how much did you improve, not starting from zero and becoming like amazingly fluent.
Right.
Or like I hate the scripted videos of this is what I know in this language. Like just kind of ramble about something. Like obviously maybe say beforehand, okay, I'm going to talk about this and this and this. Or maybe just say this is how I learned the language in that language. Don't count that you speak it if you don't.
Yeah.
Like when I'm very careful to say, oh, I'm learning. I very recently started learning Irish and Cantonese.
Right.
So that people are like, oh, do you speak? I'm like, no, not really, but
yeah. Maybe a
that's the
handful
goal.
of things, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've mentioned this before. The only video, and I'm sure that there's others out there, but the one that comes to mind when I think about polyglot speaks X amount of languages that I'm okay with is the one of Gabriel Silva, who is walking down the street and talking, because I know that there wasn't a dude with a cue card behind the camera for him, like,
Right.
because nobody's like staring at him, because that would be weird. If you saw that, you'd probably look over, and he's just walking down the street talking. He'll look over at the camera, talk a little bit more, boom, like, and it's a very natural. That one I'm okay with, but I don't think he ever really says I'm fluent in these languages. It's just look at me speaking some sentences in some other languages. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
that's the one that I'm really okay with, like, because I'm like, all right, he's not at a desk. Like, I could literally be talking to you right now, and there could be a script behind this camera. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you would never know that. Like, and that's why anytime I've ever done on my channel, like, this is how much I've learned in a week, which I've also never said that I've learned, but like, I'll speak and I'll have my phone and I'll be walking around just to kind of show, like, I don't have flashcards or cue cards. Like, that's a very subliminal thing. And like, I guess if you don't really
Right.
even pay attention, you're not there. But that's why, like, if you go back and look, like, I'm walking around and I'm constantly moving, and it's because I don't want people to think that there's stuff there, like, and it's
Yeah.
just small little stuff that I've learned.
Yeah, because people who make those kinds of videos, it's like show offy, but it's also really damaging to people who want to learn languages. Because people are like, oh, I can never do that, so I'm not going to try. Instead of, wow, that's really inspirational. I want to do that too.
Yeah.
Like, it's just kind of the way the human brain works. That like you have to be really honest about what expectations are and about how much competency you have in a language. So like at the beginning of the year with my language goals video, I said, okay, this is where I think I'm at based off of like tests I've taken and like what the levels are, like what you can talk about when you have that level.
Right.
I was like, this is where I think I am. This is where I want to be. These are the smaller goals that I'll use to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I think I'm gonna do a check-in towards the end of June and say, okay, half the year has passed. Where am I with my goals? And here's a little speaking. I will be very clear on saying this is my level.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a demonstration of me showing that's my level.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's good. How about Lao Shu? He starts off with a script, but in his stronger languages, he develops it much deeper. Well, so like the FLR method that he has is literally like 8 or 9 questions. I mean, I guess I guess you could say that he's memorizing a script, but it also has keywords that allow you to kind of plug and play those sentences. So a lot of the sentences that he says when it's like a black man speaks Bengali after 3 months, like it's still not an exact script because it's sentences that you would have taken from Duolingo
Right.
or wherever, and you just plug and played. But I also am not defending that. I mean, you know, I could see where you're thinking about that. What do you think? But to be fair, like there are some sentences I know in Chinese that specifically have still stuck with me because of his FLR method. So like if somebody would ask who your teacher is, or like I could say that I study it at home, like just some stuff like that. Like I think like who's your teacher would be like 你的老师是什么? There's我没有老师. I don't have a teacher. Like stuff like that. Like or like 自学的, which is like I study at home. I learned it by myself. So like there's some stuff. But what do you think about Volter? I never can pronounce that dude's name. Volter Cordvener. I'm assuming since he's Dutch. And his approaching people multilingual pranks. I think they're fine. I don't think he's damaging anybody, and I think they're cool.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I haven't really seen them. I've seen them that they exist, but I haven't like watched them.
And he's also very real about it, especially the ones where he's like, if I don't speak your language, I'll give you $5.
Yeah.
He shows when he doesn't speak the language, and that's huge because a lot of YouTubers would cut that out to make it like, oh man, he spoke everything. He'll leave it in there. So I appreciate it. I find him to be a very real human being. When you see someone learning language in a week, you start to doubt your own ability. 100%. I don't.
Yeah, because it's often not.
Yeah.
Advertised properly.
Yeah. Like I get it. Like YouTube is a business, right? I get that. And the people that you see doing this, they make a living on YouTube. So, you know, and one thing Xiaoma released a video. I just refused to watch it from the beginning, but I think I'm gonna go watch it and just kind of see. Because maybe it's just, I know that Luke Truman had said that maybe it was just titled a little bit weird because he does say that he was just becoming, which he didn't say a week. At least he gave it 20 days. These other dudes gave it a week and said, but I don't know. Maybe I should watch it and see because maybe it's just the title that's kind of getting you in. I don't know.
Yeah, but like I watched the first video that he made about like learning Spanish in however many days by like memorizing a dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that was the only video of that whole like series that I've actually watched.
Mm-hmm.
But like the way it's advertised, people are like, oh yeah, I can't memorize a whole dictionary in 5 days. But like that's all he's doing.
Right.
Like he's spending his whole day memorizing that dictionary.
Right. And that sound. Oh, and also I think another thing for people to remember, when your job is YouTube, and especially when your job is language learning, you notice you have a lot more time for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I spend an hour to 2 hours a day, sometimes a little bit more than that, depending on the day. But like, you know, it's hard to make that happen when you have a normal life. If YouTube ever becomes my job, you're going to see advancements in my language learning that you never thought was possible because I'll be spending 8, 10, 12 hours a day on it. But unfortunately, that's not realistic. So, also, I am going to, because it's, man, we've been talking for an hour and 40 minutes. I'm going to let you go.
Yeah. All right.
I'm going to let some people, if you have any final questions, let me know, and I'm going to start wrapping up. I just want to be mindful of your time and stuff like that. But there is another question here. But if you guys have any further questions, let me know. We'll get them, and then we'll start wrapping up here. Question to the guest: have you ever tried Esperanto, and what is your opinion on it and other conlangs?
So I haven't tried Esperanto, but I do think conlangs are kind of cool. I just personally don't see the use in my own life for learning conlangs.
Yeah.
Because, like, I'm still very young, so I have a long time left in my life to learn languages and stuff.
Right.
But I'm at the point where I'm starting to think about where would I want to go to grad school and what do I need to do to prepare for that.
Mm-hmm.
So like one of my top choices is the University of Geneva, which the program that I would want to do is taught in French.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I have that goal, like, oh, I need to improve my French in the next few years so that when I want to go there, I can.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an option. So for me right now, it's learn the languages that I need in order to be able to do what I want. And then maybe in the future, I'll experiment with that or something. But
Yeah.
when I was a kid, I would like make up my own words or my
Mm-hmm.
own way of saying something. And those, of course, had a pattern because I was the only one doing it.
Mm.
But like for me, those structured conlings don't have a purpose in my own language learning right now.
Yeah. No, I can agree with that. Like, I honestly think that if I would have learned another language, I probably wouldn't have messed with Esperanto. Esperanto was kind of like my last hope, and like if I can't learn this, then I can't learn languages.
Right.
And so Esperanto for me, I think if you haven't learned a language, I honestly think Esperanto should be spend 3 months on it, man, because it's. I mean, maybe it could be a false sense of hope and security, but like it teaches you that you can learn a language. And I think that that can be huge. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. But I also understand when I see people say I have no interest in Esperanto, like that doesn't offend me. I'm like that makes sense because you speak Spanish, French, Cantonese. You know what I mean? Like
Right, yeah.
there's not really a use for you to learn it. The only one who learned a lot in a week was Daniel Tammet, but he is autistic, and autistic people have superpowers in certain areas when inept in others. I see what you're saying, like just his, because they're kind of like a John. What is his name? John Nash. John Nash is literally from the area that I'm from, and I think is John Nash. But like I see what you're saying. Like just sometimes because he was smart as crap. So I get what you're saying. I don't know who that person is, but that's cool. Was a good talk. Do you have a streaming schedule? Man, I was gonna do that on Twitter, but there were a lot of question marks this week, so I didn't post one. I can tell you what I have coming up. I may have one tomorrow, but that's not sure. On the 1st, these are at 9 p.m. On the 1st, I have the developer of Bluebird Languages, so that'll be Monday. Wednesday, I have it's a girl named Rebecca on Twitter. She's Lang. She lives in Japan. That'll be at 9 p.m. On the 6th, which is next Saturday at 9 a.m. Eastern time, it's a chocolate sushi roll, which is a girl who lives in Tokyo and has raised her kids bilingual. And then the 7th, so that's just this coming week. And then I have a few more the following week and the following week. So there is. I'm going to try to start getting better about posting those on Twitter. It's just there was a couple of question marks this week when I wasn't 100% sure. So I didn't post it. But that's the schedule. Final question. Do you think natives are the best language teachers? Do you think you could ace an English Olympiad? I don't even know what that is. Or a foreign state exam?
I think it really depends on who is the learner,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes native speakers are great, but think about if someone asks you to explain something in English,
Yeah.
could you really explain to them why you're supposed to do something in grammar? Like
Mm-hmm.
you don't learn that in school. You just learn, here's the rule, do it.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, what's the difference between this word and this word? And you're like, well, I don't know, you just use it. So
Yeah.
sometimes a native speaker is not the best person for like learning from a beginner stage, but if you're higher up and you just want practice with like conversation and fluency and maybe having someone that you can talk about
Mm-hmm.
more complex things with, a native speaker is probably the best person because they're not going to like stumble over their words. They're just going to be able to
Yeah.
shoot stuff out. But sometimes it might be better to have someone who's learned up to a C1 or C2 level of a language explain to you these concepts because they've gone through it.
Yep.
They understand it. They can tell you how they understood it.
I think time with a native speaker is so valuable because it doesn't happen as often. If you have a chance with a native speaker, let them speak
Absolutely,
to you.
yeah.
Let them just speak to you. Don't ask, why do you do this? Because sometimes it's hard for them to, like, if somebody said, why do you put adjectives before noun? Like, if a Spanish speaker was like, why do you guys do that?
I don't know.
We just do.
We just do, yeah.
Like, so it's just one of those things. If you can get in front of a native speaker, whether it be online or what, let them speak to you. Use that experience. You can get somebody else to teach you why. Let them kind of do that. So, but cool. Was there anything else that you wanted to chat with? Are you good? Or
I'm good.
You good to go? Cool. Well, man, I thank you so much for joining. I'm glad. I wish I could remember who it was that recommended, but I don't. But I'm glad whoever it was recommended.
Yeah, me too.
Recommended, because it's a cool chat, and that's what I love about doing these. I love the connecting with people that I may not have ever connected with, and just meeting new people. So, thank you everybody for watching. Been a great stream. Thanks for all the questions and stuff like that. And all the links to Rhys-Jasper is in the description. You've got 2 YouTube channels down there. One's for music, one got some language stuff on it, and then an Instagram page as well.
Yeah, and the language channel will be much more active in the coming months. I've got a whole list of videos to make. I just was not making stuff when I was in Spain because I wasn't really happy with what I was making. But if you like what I've talked about, more will be same kind of stuff.
Yeah, so definitely hop on over and give some support there. The language channel, so the music channel is the one that's actually called Rhys-Jasper. So if you see that one's the music channel. And then the other one was, what was gender neutral?
Yeah, I started that as part of a project. I might eventually change the name of it, but it was part of a thesis project I had to do for a program.
Cool. So definitely hop over there and check out. Any final statements? What is this? Jerry Springer or something? Any final words? Anything to close on?
I think that's it. If there's anything else you wanted to say.
Okay, cool. Well, no, I'm good to go. That was a great interview. Maybe we can have you back on after a couple months or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, everybody, I appreciate you for jumping on, and I will see everybody. I guess